Hello and welcome to Radiant Moments, a J&B podcast. I'm Michelle, your host, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Let's start today with a deep breath. Inhale through your nose. Hold, and exhale. Caregiving is an incredible act of love, but let's be honest, it can be exhausting. How often have you put yourself last, feeling guilty for even considering a break? If that sounds familiar, today's episode is for you. We're diving into self-care without guilt, why it's essential, how to shift your mindset, and the realistic ways to make it part of your daily routines. Last time, we explored building your caregiving support team, letting go of the beliefs that you have to do everything alone. And in our next episode, we'll take this even further, exploring the power of self-compassion in caregiving. However, today is about you. Let's rewrite the story we tell ourselves about self-care. So why do caregivers feel guilty about self-care? If you've ever felt guilty for taking time for yourself, you're not alone. Caregivers often believe if I step away, I'm neglecting my responsibilities. That taking time out for myself is a selfish act, and I should be strong enough to handle everything I have on my plate. But let's challenge those beliefs, because self-care isn't indulgence, it's survival. Caregiving can feel endless, but burnout doesn't make you better. Imagine trying to drive a car without stopping for fuel or gas. You won't make it very far. So the reality check is, if you're running on empty, the care you provide suffers too. Taking time to reset means showing up with more energy, more patience, and more love. So the myth that self-care is selfish. We convince ourselves that stepping away means we're choosing ourselves over our loved ones. But here's the truth. Self-care ensures you have capacity to care for the long term. And if you break down, who will step in? The pressure to be strong. Caregivers are expected to push through, but even elite athletes don't train 24/7. They rest because it allows them to perform at their best. So let's look at reframing. So instead of, I can't take time for myself, there's just too much to do. Let's try, taking care of myself allows me to take better care of others. Instead of self-care is selfish, try self-care is a way to show love to myself and my loved ones. Instead of I have to do it all, let's try I am allowed to ask for help and take breaks when I need them. Self-care isn't a luxury. It's what allows you to show up and love deeply. Now that we've reframed self-care as an act of love, how do we actually start prioritizing ourselves? Guilt is a feeling, not a fact. Acknowledge it, but don't let it control you. Instead, reframe guilt into empowerment. So we're going to go from I don't have time to I can start small. An old thought might be, there's no time for self-care with everything I have to do. I want you to create a new thought. Self-care doesn't have to be big. I can start small with meaningful moments. So an example is Sarah, who is an exhausted caregiver, had to start small. So she chose 3 deep breaths before getting out of bed. She listens to her favorite song while she's making her breakfast, and she sings loudly. And she sits in silence with her morning beverage for just 2 minutes. So I'd like you to try this. Start by taking 5 deep breaths before getting out of bed. I want you to stretch while the kettle is boiling, and I want you to drink your beverage without multitasking. So then we're going from taking time for myself is selfish to my well-being is essential. An old thought would be, if I take time for myself, I'm putting my needs above my loved ones. Your new thought is, by taking care of myself, I can give them better care. So the example is Maria is a carer for her aging father, and she pushed herself to utter exhaustion, and a doctor's warning finally woke her up. If she didn't start prioritizing her own well-being, she wouldn't be able to care for her dad at all. So let's try this. Remind yourself your well-being impacts your ability to care. See self-care as a maintenance, not an indulgence. And accept that people who love you want you to be well too. Another thought is, I should always be productive, and we're shifting that to reset makes me a better caregiver. So an old thought would be, if I'm not actively doing something, I'm falling behind. Your new thought is, rest helps me recharge, refocus, and be more present. An example of this is James is a father of a special needs son. He used to feel guilty for resting until he realized when he allowed himself small breaks throughout the day, he had more patience with his son. He was able to respond calmly instead of reacting out of exhaustion. And he started enjoying caregiving instead of surviving it. So let's try this. Let's redefine productivity. Being present is just as valuable as checking off tasks. I want you to start small, giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes of rest daily. And remind yourself, rest isn't a break from caregiving. It's a part of caregiving. So instead of seeing self-care as taking something away, start seeing it as giving something back to yourself and your loved one. Now that we've covered practical self-care strategies, let's talk about what this looked like in my own journey and how I moved from guilt to empowerment. Every day as a caregiver brings unexpected challenges, last-minute changes, and constant demands. No matter how well I planned, life always had a way of throwing a curveball. Whether it was a medical emergency, a scheduled change, or an unexpected hospital stay. At first, I did what most caregivers do. I adapted, I adjusted, and I just kept going. I told myself they need me, so I just have to keep going. I'll rest later when things settle down. And I don't have time for a break. I just need to push through. And for a while, I did. I was constantly on alert, managing appointments, medications, therapies, and daily routines. And while trying to provide emotional support and stability for my loved ones, but somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing just how much I was neglecting myself. For me, my breaking point was when exhaustion took over. I didn't realize the toll caregiving was taking until I literally hit the physical wall. One hospital stay in particular changed everything. It was supposed to be short, but complications arose and we were there for weeks. Days and nights blurred together. And when you're in that environment, I barely ate, I barely slept, and spent every moment at my loved one's side. I was advocating, monitoring, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. Because in hospital, things slip through the cracks. I ignored my own hunger. I skipped meals and I let my hot chocolate go cold because I was too focused on making sure everyone else was okay. I told myself I would rest once I got home. But even then, there was so much to catch up on. The responsibilities didn't end when we left the hospital. They just shifted. Before I knew it, I was running on fumes, completely depleted, emotionally fragile, and physically drained. Then one day, I caught my reflection in the hospital bathroom mirror. And you know what? I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. To be honest, my face was pale, my eyes were dull, I had bags under them. I felt like bone-deep exhaustion, that kind that doesn't go away even with a nap or a good night's sleep. It was the kind of exhaustion that had built up over months, even years, of constantly putting myself last. And that's when it hit me. If I kept going like this, I wouldn't just burn out, I was going to break down. And if I broke down, who would be there for my loved ones? Now, the turning point for me to choose to prioritize myself, because something had to change. And for the first time in a long time, I gave myself permission to ask for help. I reached out to my support network and I asked family to assist with transportation for overlapping appointments. I applied and was granted funds to have an in-home carer for specialised support, allowing me to take short but necessary breaks. I joined an online caregiving support group. It was just a 6-week program, but it was life-changing. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who truly understood my struggles and offered support without judgment. That realization was one of the driving forces behind creating J&B Oasis, a space where caregivers could find community, resources, and support year-round. So how did I start rebuilding? Because my energy and identity were not where they were. I knew I couldn't change everything overnight, but I knew I could start small. So I made a list of tiny, manageable changes that would allow me to refill my cup without adding more stress. So I spent time journaling each night, just a few sentences. I listened to music while I showered, turning a routine task into a self-care moment. While making dinner, I was having joyful moments and having the kids dance while I cooked. I was listening to Audible books during hospital stays, car rides, or even while waiting for appointments. I was taking 5 minutes before the day started to just breathe and center myself. And I scheduled a date a month with a friend, even if it could only be virtually. I started practicing meditation or deep breathing on nights when my mind was just too busy to achieve sleep. And I was placing a few sneaky puzzle pieces before bed, giving my mind a break from caregiving responsibilities. Now, none of these changes were drastic. I didn't rearrange my life, but they were enough to remind me that I was still a person beyond my caregiving role. And the more I prioritized myself, the better I became at showing up, not just for my loved ones, but for myself too. The biggest lesson was that self-care is not a luxury. It's essential. I used to believe self-care was something I could earn, something I could get to once everything else was done. But I've learned that self-care is not a reward for hard work. It's literally the foundation that allows me and you to keep going. When I take care of myself, I show up better. When I recharge, I have more patience, energy, and love to give. When I prioritize myself, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. And I want that for you guys too, because you deserve care too. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. You are not just a caregiver. You are a person with dreams, need, and a heart that deserves care too. Now that we've shifted our mindset from guilt to empowerment, let's talk about real, doable self-care strategies that fit into even the busiest caregiving routine. Now that we've shifted our mindset from guilt to empowerment, the big question is, how do I actually make self-care happen in my busy caregiving life? And here's the great news. Self-care doesn't have to be time-consuming, expensive, or complicated. The key is finding small, consistent ways to nourish yourself, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Here's how you can start today, even in the busiest caregiving routines. Number 1, the 5-minute reset. Quick recharges for busy days. One of the biggest myths about self-care is that it requires hours of free time, when in reality, small resets throughout the day make a huge impact. I'd like you to ask yourself, if I only had 5 minutes, what would help me feel good? So, try one of these. Take 5 deep breaths before getting out of bed. Listen to a song that lifts your mood. Stretch while you're waiting for your morning beverage to brew. Step outside for fresh air. That's one of my favorites. And drink your morning beverage without multitasking. So why does this work? Because these small resets prevent exhaustion from building up and help you stay present and patient. Number 2, schedule me time. Just like any other appointment in your schedule, If it's not scheduled, it's easy to skip over. Treat self-care like another important commitment. I want you to try blocking off 15 to 30 minutes a week just for you, a couple of minutes each day. Use that time for something you genuinely enjoy. Reading, walking, journaling, or even doing absolutely nothing. Honor it as a non-negotiable part of your routine. And that works because when self-care is planned, you're more likely to follow through. And others will learn to respect that you need that time. Number 3, layer your self-care into your daily activities. Instead of adding more to your to-do list, integrate self-care into what you're already doing. So turn everyday routines into self-care moments. So like me, at shower time, play your favorite music or relaxing tunes and use a lovely loofah and body wash. When you're cooking, dance in the kitchen or listen to an uploading podcast. If you're driving, play an audible book or a song or music. When you're driving, play an audible book or have a music playlist set to go. In your morning routine, start the day with positive affirmations while brushing your teeth. Now, all of these things work because you're not finding extra time. You're making everyday moments more nourishing. Number 4, strengthening your support network. Self-care isn't just about what you do for yourself. It's also about the support you allow yourself to receive. So here are some ideas of ways to connect with your support network. Schedule a date with a friend once a month, virtually or in person, for a lovely drink. Join an online support group like J&B Oasis. Ask for help, even if it's just delegating small tasks. These connections work because connection is self-care. Having someone to talk to prevents isolation and burnout. Number 5, create an evening wind-down ritual. Caregivers often carry stress into the night, making rest quite difficult. A simple bedtime ritual signals your body that it's time to relax. So give one of these a go. Journaling. Write down one thing you did well today. Find a meditation or a deep breathing exercise, even for 5 minutes, can help you really relax. Do something soothing. Puzzles, knitting, coloring, or sipping on a cup of tea. Have tech-free zones. Avoid screens for 30 minutes before bed for better sleep. So why does this work? When you intentionally slow down, you sleep better and wake up with more energy. It's about making time, not finding it. Instead of saying, I don't have time for self-care, I need you to reframe it. I will make time for what nourishes me because I deserve it and it makes me a better caregiver. Start small, be consistent, and remember, self-care isn't selfish, it's essential. We've talked about why self-care matters, we've reframed the guilt, and we've explored practical ways to make it part of your routine. Now it's time to take action. So I challenge you this week to commit to one small act of self-care. Pick one small action, just one that nourishes you. It doesn't have to be big, just intentional. So to recap, some ideas. Take 5 deep breaths before getting out of bed. Listen to your favorite song while getting ready and sing it loud. Step outside for fresh air, even for a minute. My favorite. Write down one thing that you're grateful for. Enjoy a beverage without distractions. Schedule 10 minutes for something that brings you joy. And say one kind thing to yourself today. I really want to hear from you. Drop a comment or message me. What's your self-care action this week? And let's hold each other accountable. If you need extra support, download your free caregiver resources. We've got a gratitude journal that helps you focus on small daily joys. There's a mission statement guide which helps you align your caregiving with purpose, and journaling prompts to process emotions and reduce stress. And soon, you'll have a self-care toolkit, simple strategies to prioritize you. Come and join the waitlist for J&B Oasis membership and community for exclusive content, workshops, and a supportive space just for caregivers. Or try our 90-second reset program. A quick tool to calm your mind and regain control in under 2 minutes. Remember, self-care isn't selfish. It's what allows you to keep showing up with love and strength. So what's coming up next? The power of self-compassion in caregiving. We'll explore self-affirmations, mindset shifts, and personal stories to help you be kinder to yourself. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with another caregiver who needs to hear it. And if you can, subscribe or leave a review. It helps us reach more caregivers who need support. Until next time, stay radiant, stay empowered, and keep shining your light bright.